I'm Mari Pritchard Parker, Chair of the Lummis Legacy League. I am honored to welcome you today and thank you for joining our Fall Lummis Legacy League virtual conversation series. Our subject this afternoon is the oral history of the Indigenous peoples' presence in the greater Los Angeles Basin. I'd like to thank the Lummis Legacy League officers Hollis Davis and Dr. Lauren Aronson for their diligent work in organizing this. We hope it provides both information and enjoyment in these oh so strange times we are living through. I especially want to give a huge thank you to the board members Andy Salas, Matt Tutimes, and John Torres, who are our distinguished panel this afternoon, along with Asia Mandalay. This conversation series, which we view as setting the record straight, is an effort to continue to move forward on an issue that is near and dear to our hearts, presenting the facts about the Native American history locally and working to right some of the injustices that are still being experienced by the Indigenous peoples of the greater Los Angeles area. This is a continuation of one of Charles Lummis's passions. Our next visual conversation will take place on November 10th at 4 p.m. Matt Tutimes, Gabrielino Quiche Nation tribal biologist, will present information on the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Quiche Nation, utilization of flora and fauna of the Los Angeles Basin. We hope these efforts will inspire you to join us as a member. Information can be found on our webpage at www.lummislegacyleague.org, all one word. Now we're going to turn this over to Dr. Aronson.
So welcome everybody. I'm really glad to see all of you, and I'm happy to be sharing with you this time that we're calling Setting the Record Straight. To begin, we just have a couple of guidelines. 5 to be specific. Please be respectful of the various viewpoints. Be kind to the participants. Offer constructive criticism. This is a hallmark of academia, and that's important to us as well. Do not interrupt during the presentation, and post all questions down in the chat box. So if you have any questions specifically to a speaker, just write that speaker's name and put that in the chat box. We will have about 20 to 25 minutes to answer all of your questions. So as you're going through, please list the questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. You are all muted at this point, and this lecture is being recorded, so I do hope that's okay with everybody. With that said, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, John Torres. Professor Torres has been a professional anthropologist for over 25 years. The bulk of his research has taken place in Southern California, the Great Basin, and the American Southwest. However, he's also worked across the Americas, including Yucatan, Bolivia, and Northwest Coast, as well as the Great Plains. He's had research also in Southern Europe and Northern Africa. He brings this experience to his teaching, where he emphasizes a cultural ecology approach. And we have many of his students on today, so I just wanted to welcome all of you. Professor Torres is of Chicano and Navajo descent and is an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation. He was born in Southern California, but John has spent much of his life in the Four Corners areas of the American Southwest on the Navajo Reservation. He completed his undergraduate and graduate work at UC Riverside after attending Sherman Indian School. His teaching experience has been primarily in the fields of biological anthropology, archaeology, cultural ecology, and indigenous people of the Americas. Since Professor Torres' return to Southern California in 2014, he's been teaching in the Inland Empire. He is currently a full-time professor of anthropology and American Indian Studies at Mount San Jacinto College, and he's the tribal archaeologist for the Quiche Nation. I'd like to welcome John Torres.
Hello, hello. Sorry for standing up. I'm just this kind of, I function better being able to walk around and talk and stuff. So I was asked today to be, to kind of set this stage here for what we're talking about, and just kind of level the playing field and let us all know what tribal identity is all about. Just kind of make sure everyone knows that. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. What is tribal identity? What's a federal tribe? What's a recognized tribe? And I apologize, my terriers suddenly, for some reason, decided to bark right now, even though they haven't made a peep all day. So anyway, so tribal identity. So I'm going to talk about this kind of phenomenon. I mean, there's not a single Native person who hasn't heard this from somebody walking down the street. Oh, my great-great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess. That's what we're going to be talking about. That's what I want to talk about today. Yeah, that's probably true, although the Cherokee never had anything like princess. The Cherokee don't even call themselves Cherokee, but nonetheless, that's who gets to call themselves an Indian, I guess is what the whole topic is here today. So even the term Indian, let's start there. We all know it's a problem. We know it's incorrect. We know they made a mistake when they came up with the term, but he's Indian, we're not Indians. He's Indian. How about the term skins? Do we want to be called skins? Well, that's kind of a term that, it's one of those terms like the N-word, it's kind of a term we use amongst ourselves, but you can't call us that because it's probably not a cool thing. It's kind of a mostly young Native guy kind of thing to each other kind of phenomenon. Although there is a really cool movie called that, if you get a chance. Chris Ayres, famous for his film Smoke Signals, but this is actually one of my favorite films of his if you get a chance to watch that one. So again, we can call ourselves that. Yeah, you probably shouldn't call us that. How about the term Native American? That's we hear that a lot. Well, don't call us Indians, call us Native Americans. Well, there are all potential problems with that too, because what you could hear sometimes is people say, I'm Native American, and people think, oh, it only has to be tribes of Native North America. Well, America is really a big, big place. This is America. All 35 countries make up America. Unfortunately, a lot of people confuse just the United States with America. We are the United States of America, this part here, and then of course Alaska up there, but all these countries are Native America. So if you want to say Native American, that includes people from Quechua down here and the Haudenosaunee way up here, then sure, okay, it works. Although most people don't think that way. And the other problem is that you got knuckleheads like him who say, hey, well, I'm American, I'm Native to here, that must make me Native American. No, it doesn't, not in the sort of way it's meant to be said. So how about Amerind? That was kind of a popular term for a while, or American Indian. Amerind is just short for American Indian. Yeah, in the 1960s, you heard that a little bit. And this, I still think, I still hear the term, even in terms of American Indian, my brain often thinks Indian American before I think American Indian. So when somebody says, let's go get Indian food, my brain kind of still thinks, buffalo and fry bread, and maybe it's actually naan and curry. So I still find that confusing. Although some tribes still use the term. Then people use the term indigenous. I try to use this term more often than not now. But the problem I have even with my students is that they hear the word indigenous and people think, well, there's indigenous Australians, indigenous New Zealanders, and indigenous Africans. For some reason, people don't think of natives of the Americas as the term indigenous, but it's true, we're the indigenous people here. But people often think these folks, all these other indigenous people, well, we're part of them, if you want to use that term. Basically what it comes down to in terms of nativeness is that it depends upon what tribe you're from. Tribes kind of control their own enrollment. I'm not going to be the Indian police. If some tribe wants to claim you, then that's okay with me. And that's the point, that the tribe can claim you. Non-natives don't really have a say. So we don't like it when somebody says, well, you don't look Indian to me. Well, it's not up to you. It's up to us. It's our own tribal sovereignty that allows us to do that. And the other things always say, never judge a book by its cover when it comes to who gets to be native or not. If you're in a public space and you're, say, at a powwow, let's say, a place where lots of Native people tend to gather, you kind of have to make the assumption that everyone there is Native, and it's not up to you. So this is one of the most famous Indians around, right? Iron Eyes Cody. His name is actually Oscar de Corte. He's not Native. He's an Italian actor from the spaghetti westerns. He's not Native at all, never has been, but he kind of took on this persona and then became kind of a thing. Although in the 1970s, it was this sort of pollution campaign in LA where he was an Indian, had a tear running down his eye, because of all the pollution in LA. Not Native at all. How about this guy? Everybody likes this guy, Lou Diamond Phillips. Really nice guy. He's Filipino. He's not Native. He never claims to be native, which is the difference between him and Iron Eyes. He just happens to play every Indian in every TV show for some reason, because for some reason he has the look that, oh, he looks Indian, let's cast him as an Indian. He's good, he's a good actor, but he's not native, not at all. How about Taylor? Yeah, he's non-native, he's German. He never claims to be native either, but he plays native characters for some reason. Has that look, I guess. So how about Wes Studi? You know, it's like Wes Studi's the nicest guy you can think of. But if you ever need a really mean Indian, he's the guy that they always bring out. And he's full-blooded Sulagi actor. He's a Cherokee actor, speaks Cherokee fluently, active in his Cherokee community. He's as native as you can get, and he always plays native characters. Although it's still one of my favorite movies of his where he plays a superhero. It's still one of my favorite movies because he's actually really silly like that character in the movie in real life. So, and I can't even remember the name of the movie now. Maybe someone can chime in and remind me what the name of the movie is. But it's a whole movie on second tier superheroes. And anyway, how about this woman here? She got a lot of grief when she was elected Miss Navajo Nation because her father is African American. So, you know, but she's full-blooded, you know, she's half Navajo, but grew up on the reservation, you know, lives on the reservation to this day. Navajo was her first language. She became Miss Navajo Nation. When she got elected Navajo Nation, even within the tribe, people were all upset because she doesn't look Navajo. Well, her enrollment papers say she's Navajo. Her grandmother here says she's Navajo. She speaks Navajo better than I do. She's Navajo to me. Still active. She still does lots of great work out there on the tribe. How about this guy? I don't know who this guy is. Yeah, Will Rogers. Like, unless you're from Oklahoma, most people don't realize Will Rogers was Cherokee, enrolled Cherokee member. He's half Anglo and half Cherokee, but he's an enrolled Cherokee member, active in his community. Always talked about it. If you ever watch an old Will Rogers film, he'd often talk about being Cherokee. But you know, would you see him on the street and say, "Oh yeah, he looks native to me"? No. So the reality is that, you know, tribal identity is based heavily on context. I mean, oddly enough, you know, despite all that, we often just call each other Indian anyway, but nonetheless, context is sort of the key to what tribal identity is, especially when it comes to ourselves. When it comes to, say, a public space, let's say if I was Apache and someone said, "Hey, where are you from?" We're kind of forced to make those choices based on how you approach the question to us. So if someone was Apache and to a non-native, they might just say, "Well, I'm native," or "I'm Indian," you know, just kind of get it over with and kind of keep it casual that way. But if you're in a situation where there's lots of other natives, they would probably introduce themselves as Apache because they know, oh, that's a very, very specific type of native person, figuring they're all native. So if someone says, "Where you're from?" Well, I'm Apache, and that gets it through there. And if you're in a gathering with just a bunch of Apaches, say you're in Northern Phoenix or Flagstaff or Tucson or someplace, and there's lots of Apaches in that territory, and someone says, "Hey, where are you from?" and you realize, oh, they're probably Apache, you might say, "Well, I'm White Mountain," because there's also Chiricahua and Fort Sill, and there's lots of other types of Apaches. Specifically, that's a White Mountain Apache. And then you can even get more and more specific as you go along, if you're home and you have to deal with exactly where you might be from. So tribal identity is really kind of a tricky thing. Something a little more close to home, you might say to a local person, I'm a native Californian. I'm a California Indian to non-natives, you know, if you meet someone on the street. But if you're in a group with other tribal members, you might say, "Well, I'm Luiseno," maybe to other non-natives, to other natives. You know, say you're at the Gathering of Nations powwow in Albuquerque. There's, you know, 30,000 Indians there. You might say, "Oh, I'm Luiseno," knowing that you're a mission tribe from Southern California. More often than not, you actually would say that big word, what I'm not going to try to say and butcher in a horrible way. And he could jump in if he wants to. And that's specifically the tribal name of the people from Pechanga. So it's a band of Luiseno, specifically the band from Pechanga. And that means something. If I said that at Saboba, they know exactly who I am. I'm a cousin of someone who lives at Pechanga. Or if I said that out at Agua Caliente, it's like, oh, that's one of the other Luisenos from the other side of the mountain, or something like that. So identity can be very, very specific that way. For me, it's even more complicated because Navajo is make everything worse and more complicated than it ever has to be most of the time. So for other people, I would just usually say I'm Navajo, because most natives, or most even non-natives, have heard the term Navajo because we have a giant landmass, and we were on CNN thanks to COVID a couple weeks ago. So most people know who Navajo people are. Plus, we're kind of everywhere anyway. But to others, to other natives, we call ourselves Dene. We usually say we're Dene amongst other natives, because Dene, people know, oh yeah, it means you're what people used to call the Navajo, but we know that's what you really call yourself is Dene. To other Navajo people, say I'm at the Shiprock Fair or the Window Rock Fair, and there's nothing but 30,000 Navajos there, then you got to listen to me say this long thing every time we run into each other. Xie, Jean Torres, and you go over and over. Every time you meet somebody, you have to say, this tells everybody everything they might need to know about me, my gender status, my grandparents' clans, my parents' clans, where I'm from, all this, and every time you meet each other. And it's kind of a running joke amongst Navajos that it takes 20 minutes to just introduce everyone on a single panel before even a discussion can begin. So context is everything when it comes to identity. And then you have something called official tribal identity. Official tribal identity means in a government-to-government relationship, you have some special status. And that's what I mean by official identity. Well, that's sort of how we really talk about each other. But officially, there's a couple types of things. There's what we call federal recognition. In other words, the feds say you really do exist. There's state level recognition in terms of tribal identity. There's county level identity. And then there's something just called self-identity. As Indian people, we deal with that all the time. The biggest one, of course, is federal recognition. There are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. That means they get services under the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In other words, there's a federal agency, there's the American Indians Crafts Act, there's several things as part of that. Indian Health Service are part of that give mostly rural natives, but also urban natives have access to healthcare that way too, specifically for federally recognized tribes. We are treated as sovereign nations. They are literally countries within the United States. 574 separate nations. That's why we have treaties. You have a treaty with the federal government, just like North Korea or Italy or France or any other country. You have a treaty. We don't have contracts. We don't have MOUs. We have treaties, just like any other sovereign nation. That means we can print our own passports. We can print our own driver's licenses, our car registration. We haven't gone as far as printing our own money yet, but I suppose technically we could, although I don't know anyone who'd want a Navajo buck, but there you go. But I have my own tribal passport, my own tribal driver's license in that way. Because the big deal is that we control our enrollment. We get to say who gets to be part of that tribe. Regardless of what you might see on the outside, we get to control that. And every tribe gets to control it differently. For us, you actually have to prove that 2 of your grandparents are full-blooded Navajo in order to be enrolled with the Navajo Nation. So you have to be 2/4 or half, but they do things in fourths because things are based on grandparents. So you have to be half Navajo to be enrolled. If you're a quarter, you can say you're Navajo, but you can't be enrolled. You can't officially say you're Navajo. If you're not a card-carrying, federally recognized tribe, you can't even sell artwork as a tribal person. That's against the law. But we do have sovereign land if you're a federal recognized tribe. You have your own property, your own reservation that you can manage. That's why some tribes can have gaming. If they are federally recognized, then they can choose to have gaming. If the state that their federally recognized tribe reservation is in allows gaming, then they can have gaming too. Even though the state of California doesn't have machines, we have the lotto. So if any state has the lotto, and when you scratch off the little things and win $5 or whatever it is, then any sovereign nation within that boundary can also have its own gaming facility. Casinos, essentially. That's why kind of the DAPL, the Dakota Access Pipeline, that's why it was a big deal, because it was sovereign land and they put the pipeline across it in a way that everyone was not happy with. They keep saying, well, it wasn't tribal land. Well, it was, but nonetheless, there it is. Then we have what we call state recognized tribes. There are 62 tribes across the country from 11 different states that are only recognized at the state level. So the feds don't recognize them, but the states do, and will give them state services, but not federal services. California doesn't have any. We don't have any here in California. But they don't actually have sovereign land. They don't have treaties. Their land base, if they have any, is treated like an asset to a corporation. They function very differently. They mostly function as a company than they do an actual federally recognized tribe as a tribal group. But they do have some access to things because of that level of recognition. And then I just threw this one in because there's kind of self-recognition. That's when, I woke up one day and realized I was an Indian in a previous life. I don't even know what to do with that. You can't even argue with that person. That person really believes it no matter what. That's okay. That's just, if a tribe doesn't claim you though, it's probably not going to work out too well for you. But there you go. And then we have kind of where we're at today. So why we're here today, and that's about county recognized tribes. LA County recognizes 3 specific tribes. So they don't have federal recognition, they don't even have state level recognition, but LA County still, for whatever reason, chose to recognize a Gabrielino band, Fernandino band, and Venterteño band for Ventura, San Fernando, and San Gabriel missions. And they're kind of problematic in a lot of ways. And that's kind of what brings us here today. So that's what I have to kind of catch you up on what tribal identity is all about. And I guess, I don't know if I turn it back over to Lauren, or is she going to turn it back over to this? Yeah, so turn it back over to Lauren. I don't know if anyone saw that. On my screen, all I saw was the little quiche. So I hope people actually saw that. I don't know. Was it on the screen? Okay.
See your screen.
Anyway, thank you.
We can see the screen, and it was fabulous. Thank you for that introduction. It was really great to, and many people are asking questions already, John. I'm going to ask one really quickly. Stephanie says, I often hear tribe and nation used interchangeably. Is there a preferable term?
Most federally recognized tribes choose nation because they want to emphasize their sovereign status as a nation state. But some have been called tribe for so long, they just get called tribe. The tribes in New Mexico often just refer to themselves as Pueblo. The Santo Domingo Pueblo, even though it's technically a tribe and a nation state like all the others, because they have special status under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, they still go by the traditional Pueblo names instead. But technically, any federally recognized tribe is a nation state of its own. It's a nation. So it's up to them what they want to call themselves. We are Navajo Nation, and we say that mostly because we're the biggest. 17.2 million acres is a lot of land. Cherokee have us beat in numbers. There's more enrolled Cherokee in numbers, but we have the biggest reservation, and we're very proud of that.
Great. And Sita just said, nowadays, South Asian is used for people from and cultures of the Indian subcontinent. So
right, that's true. Yeah, and I talk about that in my class too. It's like you can't even use the term Asian because it includes all those folks in India who are Asian, but that's not what people usually mean when they use that term. They're usually thinking of Han, which is a very sort of specific ethnic group in mainland China, but that's another story.
Thank you. So
sure.
I'd like to introduce the next 2 speakers. They are speaking together. Andrew Salas, he's the son of Ernie Tutamez Salas. He's the chief of the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, the Quiche Nation. And Ernie is hopefully on this call, and we just want to thank him for being here. Mr. Salas has served as the chair of the tribe since 2008. Under the guidance of his father, he's attained over 35 years of experience in Native American consulting and protection of tribal cultural resources. Mr. Salas works closely with archaeologists, museum staff, college professors, and people from lead agencies on protecting cultural resources and the revitalization of the Gabrielino culture. He serves as the region's only tribal representative for the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, which was designated in 2014 by President Barack Obama. Andy will be speaking with Matt, and Matt Tutanez is the son of John Tutanez Jr., an elder in the Quiche Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians. He's an active member in the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians for the Quiche Nation, and he served as a tribal biologist since 2010. Matt has taught Quiche Gabrielino cultural heritage. He's learned this from his elders. Multiple elders have passed along this information to him that he's going to be sharing with us today. He has a Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of Science degree from Cal State University Long Beach with a degree in biology. And he is currently the tribal specialist in ethnobotany and cultural uses of native plants and animals. He is an active member of the Tribal Advisory Council for California's Environmental Protection Agency. And Matt works to promote tribal concerns and traditional ecological knowledge for the state's environmental policies. He is the only representative of a non-federally recognized tribe on the EPA's Tribal Advisory Council. Without much delay, I'd like to turn it over to Andy and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everybody, you can see us. We thank you. First of all, I want to thank Lauren, Mari, Hollis, John, everybody that put this together to finally give us the opportunity to tell our history. And I thank all of you that are online watching this. That's why we left the doors open, because we wanted to invite everybody so that they were able to hear our history pertaining to the lineal descendants of the Los Angeles Basin. Today, I know there's a lot of confusion on who the indigenous people are of the LA Basin, but today you're going to hear it from the horse's mouth. You're going to hear the history as we were taught this history through our elders, our grandfathers, grandmothers, and my father, about our history and how we are the foundation of the LA Basin. But before we get started, we did a little recording of my father, and we want to open this up with an opening prayer from my father, who is chief and spiritual leader of our tribe, and that's Ernie Perez Tautimes Salas. So we'll start with that.
Let us pray to the four directions: the east, the south, the west, norte. The east represents the light of wisdom, illumination, freshness, peace, and understanding. From the south comes the power of life, vitality, growth, and warmth. From the west represents of maturity, autumn, rain, snow, thunder, and also death, or the quality of things coming to an end. And from the north comes the cold, purifying winds, the cleansing of austerity, the strength of endurance, and the white snows and hairs of old age. Nawika, Aok, Anek, Tamik, Kwata, Tayai, Hanuka, Aho.
Our tribal ancestral territory extends, our general territory, our land, was west to Topanga Canyon, to the Malibu Creek, north, covered all the San Gabriel Mountains back to the Mojaves, east, the lower lands up to Yucaipa, and south, down to Elisa Creek, Dana Point. We cover the Channel Islands. But what we want to share most of all today is who we are, who our tribe is of the Los Angeles Basin. In 1700, when the first Spanish arrived here to conquest upon our people, they arrived in our village site over in the Montebello area, South El Monte. This particular location was the village that we descend from through my father. It's called Ciba, Savannah. Today, that little community today is called Savannah, California. There's a school district there. My grandfathers worked for the old Richardson, but by our sister tribes as the people of the willow houses. Keach means home. We were recognized by the houses we lived in, just like the wigwam people were recognized by the house they lived in. We were recognized by the Cahuilla, the Serrano, as Quichanos. As time evolved, In 1769, the Spanish began to call us first quecherinos, as they recognized us because of the dwellings, the homes we lived in. On the arrival, when the first Spanish arrived in South El Monte, at La Misión Vieja, which is the original site of the San Gabriel Mission, the first chapel that was established by our people was made of willow and tule, our resources. But when we first made this connection with the Spanish in this area, this was the beginning of the end for our people. We became slaves to these Spanish Europeans that arrived here to build the missions, the 21 missions during the expedition of the missions. At La Misión Vieja, the first village site, which was Siba, or the first mission site, it was flooded. There was a large flood there that washed away the first chapel at that location, where we moved to higher land into the area of where San Gabriel is today and where the San Gabriel mission is established there today. This area was known as Tovascana. After the establishment of the mission, our names were changed to Gabrieleno. We were named after the San Gabriel mission, just like the Fernandinos, the San Fernando Indians, just like the Juaneños, the San Juan Capistrano Indians. But what I wanted to share with you today is the unique history that we have, how we survive today as a tribal government, how we have existed through the decades. Through my father, we have a prominent history. My great-great-grandfather was Nicholas Joseph, who led some of the historic revolts at the San Gabriel Mission, and his last revolt was in 1785 when he engaged a young Quiche woman by the name of Torperina. This rebellion was very close, but it didn't follow through, so they were arrested. They were arrested and they were sentenced to 17 years. Torperina was sent to San Juan Bautista, Carmel, up in the Carmel area, while our great-great-grandfather was sent to the Presidio of San Francisco. He was released later, brought into San Gabriel back, where he later died and is buried at the San Gabriel Mission. Through the decades of when those Spanish Europeans arrived here, those Spanish Europeans also became my great-great-grandfathers. We became mestizos. My father's name is Ernie Perez Teltimes Salas. He carries the Perez name because of his grandfathers, who were the Perez Nietos family, or Rancho Los Nietos. It was Manuel Perez Nietos and Juan Crispin Perez Nietos who received the largest land grant here of California of 360,000 acres. They were the owners of Huntington Beach, Boca Chica, Seal Beach, Long Beach, Los Alamitos, Gardena, Bellflower, Los Coyotes, Gardena, Santa Fe Springs, Whittier, all the way on up to La Misión Vieja was their land. From the Santa Ana River to the San Gabriel River was their land they owned. They were prominent soldiers who were managers of the missions, San Juan Capistrano and Mission San Gabriel. They are buried at the San Gabriel Mission as you walk into the front doors in the grounds with the Padres. Today, they are buried in the old mission. These were my grandfathers as we became mestizos. This is how we survived. We survived by living, taken away from the mission, and living in these remote areas, we became rancheros, our grandfathers, our uncles, our great uncles, our great grandmothers and grandmothers. They became the servants to these prominent Spanish families as they lived on these ranchos that were now part of these large land grants. In 1781, when the first Mexican families, 14 of them, walked and came in from Baja California, from Santa Fe, New Mexico, into Los Angeles, they became the founders, the 14 families of Los Angeles. My direct great-great-grandfathers were the Rodriguez and Noriega of those 14 families who named Los Angeles, Los Angeles. This was the time period as we became mestizos and intermarried with those settlers that were coming in and establishing themselves in our native land. These families here, if you go to Alvera Street, there's still the bronze plates that tell the history of each and one of those 14 families. But this is the family I descend from because it was their granddaughter who married Juan Crispin Perez Nietos of Rancho Los Nietos. And keep in mind that these are the Spanish soldiers that were the original owners of Rancho Los Cerritos, the Adobe, the Bixby Ranch of Long Beach. They were the original owners of these adobes that were established by our ancestors, the Indians who were enslaved to build them. Also, through my family line, I don't know if any of you have heard about the history of Victoria Reed. The Spanish gave her the name Bartolomea. She and her first husband, Pablo Maria, received one of the largest land grants here also of Rancho Santa Anita. They were the owners of Lacey Park, the Huntington Library, all the way down to the Arboretum. This was the land that her and her husband owned for many years until it was taken over. She is the grandmother of some of our tribal members today, and she's also the godmother of some of our tribal members' grandmothers from long ago.
And so for her historic period, if you've ever seen the play, the longest running play in California history, I believe it is, called The Ramona. And The Ramona was written by, what's her name? I'm blanking, but she wrote it over there by the Mission. And she based it on Victoria Reed. And so Victoria had Eastman,
Everston, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Victoria had a land grant provided to her by the Spanish crown. And during the time that Mexico was coming in with the California period, and then the American period coming in, this is when she's living, and she was utilizing that ranch very similar to the example that we give is like a Schindler's List of a refuge location for the natives, because during that time when the Americans came in from the 1850s to the 1860s, it was just slaughter. And so Victoria Reed had pretty much provided refuge for the families that are still living today within our tribe for their survival during this very Holocaust type of period, because there were 3 different Holocausts that went on here, coming from the Spanish period, then the Mexican period, which you were explaining how the families survived, and then now into the American period. And this is the period that we're explaining right now. And so you can look up about Victoria Reed in history. Helen Hunt Jackson, thank you so much. She's the one that wrote The Ramona, Helen Hunt Jackson. And she used Victoria Reed as her her muse, if you will.
So as she acquired, she had this land, her husband, Pablo Maria, passed away, and now she remarried a Scotsman by the name of Hugo Reed. their home together was at the Arboretum in Arcadia, California, by the San Anita racetrack. But during the times of the 1840, 1850, these were good friends. Benjamin D. Wilson of Mount Wilson and his wife, Ramona Yorba of Yorba Linda, they actually became owners of her property, and they made a fake deed and took her land from her during that time. And right here, you can see the fake deed. You know, it basically said that she could not read or write, and they put an X by her name and wrote up a deed and took her land for her. But on the right there, you can see very well with her signature that she was able to read and write, because a lot of her writing, because they were at the ranch there was already established vineyards that were established by the Spanish, and she had taken over those vineyards, and her and her husband were producing wine, brandy. And because of the vineyards at this location, B.D. Wilson and Mr. Olvera of Olvera Street, they wanted this land, and they took it and they got it. And throughout the decades, they became prominent landowners of not only this land, but land in San Bernardino, land in Glendale, and a lot of the land in the LA area. As you may know or not know, B.D. Wilson was the mayor of Los Angeles. He was also the third supervisor of the county of Los Angeles. He was the California senator. He was a large, prominent landowner, and he was also the BI agent of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who was supposedly taking care of the Indians of the Southern California area. And he was part of the establishment of Fort Tejon over at the Grapevine over there. My father, my grandmothers, and my grandfathers, and my aunts became the servants to Benjamin D. Wilson as they lived with him. As you can see this on the next picture here, Benjamin D. Wilson, which Mount Wilson is named after, and Ramona Yorba of Yorba Linda, who her father was Bernardo Yorba, a prominent Spanish landowner of Yorba Linda. That's where the name derived from, Yorba Linda. They became large landowners. They were married, Benjamin D. Wilson and Ramona. They are the grandparents of General George Patton and Ann Patton. In this picture here, this is my aunt, my great aunt Feliciana, and my cousin Anita is the baby, and standing next to him is Ann Patton. This is a historic picture there at the Huntington Library. So when we go to the the Huntington Library, they open up the doors, they welcome us, and they acknowledge that my dad is from the families of that Huntington Library, because that's where my dad grew up. That's where my dad lived as a young boy, because of his parents and grandparents that were servants to the families of the Wilsons and Pattons.
So throughout the ages, the landowners, those who took occupation of the land and deeded themselves the land, such as what the Spanish did, such as what the Californio-Mexican period did, and then such as what the Americans did, the families of our tribe survived these periods because we were with these prominent families. And those prominent families are what protected the bloodline that is speaking to you today.
And you know, in about, real quick before we go to this, in about 1926, the indigenous people throughout the region here and throughout the continent, we became citizens in our own land. So when that happened, we were able to leave these ranchos that we were servants to, my grandfathers, my grandmothers, again, that were servants to. We were able to leave these lands. And leaving these lands, I wanted to just tell a quick story about my uncles that knew nothing. They weren't plumbers, they weren't construction workers, They were rancheros. They knew about the plant life. They knew about the work in the fields and what have you. But about 1941, my uncles, they worked for a prominent family here in the San Gabriel area who had a nursery. And it's the San Gabriel Nursery on San Gabriel Boulevard. And during 1941, this Japanese family, the Yoshimuras, who owned this property, they were taken into, they were in captivity and sent to camps, concentration camps. One of them being there at the Santa Anita racetrack, and the other one, Manzanar, and what have you. But a lot of the Japanese were losing their properties because of the years that they spent in these camps during the war. But my uncles, my cousins, who worked the ranches for these families, never left the nursery. They made a promise to that Japanese family that they were going to hang on to it until they were released from their camp. And that's what they did. After 4 years, 5 years that they were released, the Yoshimura family, when they came out, they thought they were going to come out to a lost property. But when my uncles, as you see here, my cousin Gene to the right with the Yoshimura families, my uncle Joe, and the rest of my family who were the rancheros there, they walked up, they hugged each other, and with that, my aunts and uncles came with the box with all their little funding that they were able to save for them, and the receipts and everything that inventory that they spent and they sold, and they gave it back to them. So just that little history, that the livelihood that they felt that they were going to lose also, my cousins and my uncles were that family, those natives that protected that nursery for this family or these individuals, and continued to work with them throughout the years. And actually, Mr. Yoshimura actually bought my cousin Gene his home there behind the nursery, where he lived with him throughout his life. And the lady there that you see in the picture there was my aunt, who was from Pachanga, and she was part of saving the nursery there. And on the next picture there, you see my father, Ernie, with Maggie, who is the daughter and who was a very young child during that time, where the arrow is pointing her, when they were taken into the camp at a very young age. And now she's probably in her, like my dad, in their 90s. And she never forgets what they did, my family did, to preserve this, their
and just
nursery.
Showing how our native families, we've never taken ownership over this land. We've always been stewards to the land and helping the land to profit the human living here while on this landscape. So in every generation, the families of our tribe have always provided gifts and provided ways to live within this landscape. And all our families have ever been given in return is death and is decimation. And even, into the 40s, we still have these great relationships with other families who have come to this landscape and lived, because our intention is not to own anything, not to have control of anything. Our intention is to live a good life on this landscape and understand how the landscape wants to give us a good life in return. And that's the unfortunate reality, that because our family lineage and our tribe's lineage has been removed from the conversation of an actual ancestral connection to this land and been replaced with a mystical understanding of some foreign entity that's the reality that's going on with our fourth genocide. In terms of the first genocide was with the Spanish, the second is with the Mexican, the third is with the American, and now we're experiencing our fourth genocide within academia within the term Tongva.
Yes, and this term Tongva has desecrated our history, our true identity. There was no such tribe called Tongva. We were the tribe that was infiltrated, that name Tongva. And today, for 26 years, these elders are laying in bed. You saw my father earlier. You saw him laying in his bed. They fought to preserve their true identity, why it was overtaken by academia utilizing this word Tongva. There was no such tribe. Everything that we kind of basically shared with you, there's documents. People fail to research, to study, to learn. Truly, they take the word for somebody who says that we're Tongva. We are not Tongva. There's no such thing as Tongva. And today, we are going to make sure on behalf of our tribe, behalf of our elders, and behalf of our ancestors that struggled through the genocides to have us here today, that we're going to correct that wrong. We will not utilize that name no longer. So just so there's an understanding, I just want everybody, I know it was kind of quick, but we want to have everybody understand that the lineal descendants are still here with the stories, with the facts. The doors are open. Ask us, we'll share with you whatever we have, our identity, who we are. We're here to share it with you. And thank you.
Okay, well, I would like to thank both Andy and Matt for that amazing presentation. And this is why we talk about the importance of setting the record straight. Andy and Matt have just done that for you. Thank you so much for doing that and allowing us to talk about the true lineage and the true individuals associated with our particular area in which most of us live. I'd like to turn everything over to our last speaker, Asia Medley. Asia holds a degree in history. Her focus is in Native American and African American studies. She worked as a cultural interpreter in a living history museum. Starting next year, Asia hopes to start the MA program or the master's program in education. She is really interested in learning about history, but then sharing what she has learned with others. And she's going to talk to us today about how certain groups of individuals control what we hear about the past and how we can make sure to right those wrongs for the future. So I'd like to turn it over to Asia.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start off by reading a quote from my favorite historian, Howard Zinn. History is important. If you don't know history, it is if you were born yesterday. And if you were born yesterday, anybody up there in a position of power can tell you anything. And if you have no way of, anybody up there in a position of power can tell you anything, and you have no way of checking up on it. Studying history is imperative, especially now. For many, many years since my childhood, certain parts of history have been hidden and kept out of our history books, which in turn made me oblivious to what was going on in the world and what was occurring in my own neighborhood. That also inspired me to get involved in many social justice issues. Studying and learning the history of America allows us to understand each other and our different perspectives and how they all came to be. I study history to learn the truth and make others aware of it so that we may prepare and fix our future. Most American school books praise people like Christopher Columbus and many others. The school books say that the English settlers were brave and the land that they discovered was ordained to them through religion. The word settler means to settle in a place where no one has ever lived before. America was already occupied by indigenous groups before explorers decided to set sail. The history books fail to tell the truth about all the indigenous people of this land. Some history books fail to mention that the indigenous people across the globe and the Americas. They also fail to mention that indigenous people were forced into assimilation through colonialism. Colonization is the process of taking political or economic control of a region, and colonizers are the people and institutions that are a part of the process. Unfortunately, in America, people use the labor of enslaved Africans to line their own pockets, and they also fought the native people for control of land that was not theirs. America is a name given to two land masses by colonists. Indigenous people have and had words for this land in their own language. It is time to reconcile and decolonize our minds and be mindful of how we are showing up every day. My social justice activism is stimulated through lived experiences, but also by studying history. Settler colonialism attempted to wipe away the indigenous people, but they've persisted even till this very moment in time. In spite of all that has happened to indigenous people, they still remain fighting for their communities, their land, resources, and their future. I moved to the Los Angeles area last year, and I went to a protest for the removal of the Christopher Columbus statue. I learned about the history of the Gabrielino Nation, and I was introduced to Andy Salas, and I was able to learn the real history. I think it is important that we continue to speak about their true history and shed light on the Gabrielino Nation in the Los Angeles area. I won't take all day, but I will end it with a quote, just like how I started, by Howard Zinn. I suppose the most revolutionary act one can engage in is to tell the truth. So thank you guys for participating.
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being part of this. Thank you. And now I would like to open things up for questions. So I am going to start with some of these that are up on the screen. The first question is for John. John, what is your opinion regarding the recent event where the EPA has granted the state of Oklahoma regulatory control over environmental issues on nearly all tribal lands?
This is the court case from recently. Is that what you're talking about? There was a court case recently where somebody had actually committed a crime and then actually sued, saying that you can't commit a crime on your own reservation lands, and actually won that case because the treaty says that all of Oklahoma was Indian land. That's why it existed as an Oklahoma territory to begin with. So I think that's the case you're referring to. Or there was that's not it. Yeah. Well,
no, I'm waiting to see if there's anything. That must be it. Yes.
Yeah, in which case I think it's great. I think Oklahoma should be returned back to the tribes, although it won't ever happen. Technically, 3/4 of Oklahoma belongs to people who were transported there, thanks to Jackson, and the original people that were there. So there's already conflict between the tribes that were there in that region of Oklahoma and Arkansas, and then Seminole and Muskogee and Miskasukie and Cherokee. They were all brought over from Florida and Georgia and Alabama. So technically it's returned back to them, although nothing's really going to come of it, I don't think.
Okay, and the next question again for you, John. How does one go about getting enrolled or recognized as a Native American? How does one get the card, I think is what they're asking.
Yeah, and I think I answered that person on the chat, but it basically depends upon the tribe you're in. Every tribe does their enrollment differently. Amongst the Cherokee, you have to prove descendant back to the Dolls Rolls in order to be included. For Navajo Nation, you have to show birth certificates from grandparents to show that they were enrolled. So there's also some nonprofits where you can just send in $50 in an application and they'll enroll you, but they're not an actual tribe. So it really depends upon what you're asking. But for a federally recognized tribe, they all have their own census departments that are control enrollment cards and numbers and all that stuff.
Thank you. The next question for Andy and Matt. What is the best way to support the Quiche Nation, and how should we get this information? What can we do to help you?
Can you hear us?
You're on
Yeah,
an
we
iPad.
can hear you.
Yeah, our computer just shut down. So unfortunately we can't get back on the computer, but I connected with my cell phone. I wish I could use my computer. We on our website, www.gabrielinoindians.org, and it's all one word, Gabrielino Indians. It's like the word Gabriel with an ENO ending and then Indians. So it's www.gabrielinoindians.org. There's a donation page on there that you can access, and all that money gets put forth towards our tribal cultural resource protection, which we can have a whole other talk just about that component of what we're actually being able to recover and protect and preserve with all this development that's going on in our landscape right now, and how the agencies, there is a new law that's put forth, Assembly Bill 52, but how agencies are very new to working with tribes, and just how a lot of that struggle of government to government relations is still very apparent in our current day right now with tribal governments and with state, local, county agencies that with their understanding of tribes, it's unfortunately very shallow, their understanding of relationships with tribes. And so, and this isn't, this is part of our experience, but this is also an experience that's, throughout California and then throughout the United States, of
With
course,
other tribes.
with other tribes. And so that's a component that we are continually working on, is that relationship building to try and help them understand that, our tribe isn't here to take from them. They keep on thinking that we're here to threaten them somehow, or take something from them, or take away their authority over the land. And all we're simply trying to do is to help everyone, all of us, be able to live on this land and support each other during our lifetimes while we're here together.
I mean, it's not their fault, in reality, when you really look at it, it's the system's fault. They failed to share our history of the actual tribal government that exists still here in the LA Basin. So when you hear that they need to consult government to government, they're like, what? There was Indians here before? They don't understand that concept. A lot of people don't, like some of the history that I shared, just today, other people that we meet, they don't understand there was actual natives here. So when there's need to consult and engage with these government to government agencies, they don't recognize the bottom line.
Andy and Matt, there's a comment that on the website, there's a list of the actual Gabrielino people, and I believe that's on your website. Is that correct?
Which one? Could you tell me which one? Because there's actually 3 of them.
It says the website has a list of Gabrielino people with that are actual members, and I was wondering if what website that would be.
No, that's not our. If it has anything to do with Tongva, it doesn't have nothing to do with us, because the word Tongva or the term Tongva does not pertain to the Gabrielino. There's no connection. That's why you see the Gabrielino / Tongva. It's because we, the Gabrielino, helped in 1994 a foundation who decided to call themselves Tongva to protect the site. And those are the actual individuals that overtook and infiltrated our tribe. So there's no such thing as Tongva again. So if you're looking at a site that has anything to Tongva, we do not have any association with that site. As I forgot, I wasn't able to show you because our computers went up. Our state recognition kind of tells it all. They recognize, the state of California recognized the Gabrielino, which was us, without the use of the term Tongva. So the Tongva were never recognized. There was no such tribe. It was the Gabrielino Tribal Council, which is us, which was my father, which was my grandmother, my uncles, my aunts, all the tribe. That's the tribe that received that state recognition.
Thank you. Thank you for setting the record straight. There are quite a few people that are thanking all of our speakers for a wonderful job, for sharing the information, and asking for copies of this recording. So I wanted to let everybody know that it will ultimately be put up on the Lummis Legacy League website. And if you can find it there or on the Gabrielino website, hopefully as well.
They could. And you know what? You're more than welcome to go ahead and share my number with them, because I do better by speaking face to face than I do looking at a computer and looking at pictures. It kind of distracts me. But I want to be able to share with all the true history. I want to take them down memory lane to show them and give them an understanding of our people, the Keach Nation here in the LA Basin.
Perfect. This next question, I believe, should go to Matt. And I think it leads into our next talk on November 10th. It's from Kathleen. I would love to learn more about the indigenous relationship with the land, care and use of native plants for food and medicine, fire care of the land, and other knowledge that has been held for centuries by the indigenous people. Do the Gabrielino host any programs to share this vast knowledge with others?
Oh boy, that's a good little intro for our November talk. Yes, we are always trying to share that knowledge regarding pretty much just the value of the land that is here to support our human, what's the word, like our failings, like our ability not to be able to heal ourselves right now during this COVID time. We're all waiting on this vaccine and, you know, waiting on humans to be able to provide a product when our creator has already provided it. And these are items that science call monoterpenoids, sesquiterpenes, flavonoids. These are compounds that work at the cellular level to be able to heal our body. And why does it heal? Because through evolution, all these plants have already created all these compounds to help them battle against molds, fungus, bacteria, you know, all these little microorganisms that are invading our communities today and are causing havoc throughout the world. These are already compatible by the compounds found within our native flora. And a lot of these compounds, you know, the main concept, and this is what we're going to go into more. I'm sorry for making it a long answer to the question, but the main concept that we have to realize in our generation today is that we have already been provided a receptor system for these compounds within our bodies. That's some of the new research that's being done with cannabis. We already have a cannabinoid receptor system in us. And this understanding of how these receptors or how these systems work to be able to work in the therapy of us healing ourselves, that's the component that our generation is missing out on, because the only receptors we're triggering are receptors that are hit by Tylenol, hit by Advil. These are very concise mechanisms that happen, whereas our plants, they trigger a whole cascade of other mechanisms that aren't provided through our Western medicine today. And that cascade of mechanisms is what we're missing out on for the therapy value. And that's the component that our native plants provide. And that's some of the discussion we're going to go into next month about not just, you know, our sages and everything, but pretty much all of our plants have the capacity to help us during our generation today for acne, for inflammation, for, you know, viral protection, for bacterial protection. You know, we're all going to have to worry about also mosquitoes. Many of our plants are insect repellents that can be utilized, just like you utilize, you know, the Avon stuff, the smell so, what is it? The something soft, the
Skin So Soft.
Skin So Soft, thank you. That's because it had herbal compounds in it that detract the mosquito. So anyway, I know, long story longer, but these compounds are readily found within our native flora and have always been here. But right now, the native flora, or mainly in the last generations, the native flora have been experiencing what our family lines have been experiencing on that landscape, and that's decimation. And when you remove these native components, whether it be the families that were native here or the plants and animals that were native here, removal of all those components is what's leading to all the destruction that we're happening today. And all our lineage of our tribe is saying is, let us help each other to help, expand this information regarding the plants and animals and regarding their resource value, not just for Indians of yesterday, it's for us today. That's our main thing, is these plants and animals are useful for us today, not just to sit behind a fence and look at. They are very valuable for our needs today. Anyway, I'll stop now.
So Andy, if somebody would like to reach you, or Matt, if somebody would like to reach you directly, what is the best way, the email? Is it admin@Gabrielino Indians?
Yeah, that would be the most direct way. It'd be ADMIN, and then it's at GabrielinoIndians.org, O-R-G.
Perfect. Okay. admin@GabrielinoIndians.org. So many people have asked as well about, they said, thank you, Matt, for having your passion. And people are sending you applause for what you just said. So thank you, everybody. And lastly, there's a question on how to sign up for the next talk. As individuals that participated in this talk, you should be getting an email flyer in the near future explaining when to register for the November 10th talk. The November 10th is a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. It will be structured very much like this, as a conversation and discussion, and really focus on what Matt has been talking about for the last couple minutes. So I'd like to say a giant thank you from all of us. Again, thank you to John, to Andy, to Matt, and to Asia. Thank you to Mari and to Hollis for bringing this to you. And it has been truly an honor to be spending this time with you. And I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.